Awesome. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. A very warm welcome to all of you, all the participants from all over the world. On behalf of New Delhi, we have a very special event lined up today, and we have a very, very special speaker. Some quick housekeeping points. One, I'm going to request everyone to turn their videos on. It'll be good for Lance to be able to see you all and interact with you. The chat is open. Feel free to pop in your comments there. Put in all your questions on the chat. We plan to have the session with Lance for about an hour and then move to Q&A. I'm going to suggest that you put Zoom on speaker view to enjoy the session the most. I also want to quickly thank EO New Delhi's sponsors, ASK. Thank you, and we value your support. So Lance has had a very tough interview with Oprah many years ago. And now he's going to be interviewed by our very own Chopra. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Naval Chopra, co-learning chair, EO New Delhi.
Thank you very much, Deep, and welcome everyone, especially my brothers and sisters across the border from Lahore. So as Deep said, 90-minute session. I'm going to be in conversation with Lance for 60, and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. Lance Armstrong, of course, needs no introduction, but I think Owen Wilson's character in the 2006 movie, You, Me, and Dupree, described Lance perfectly when he said, "The guy's done more with one testicle than you and I could do with three." Welcome, Lance Armstrong, the ballsiest guy out there, to EO New Delhi.
Well, that was, I honestly, I didn't expect to hear a quote from you, me, and Dupree. That was, that's amazing.
Well, Lance, this is an adult audience, and I know you enjoy swearing, so feel free to swear during this interview. I'm hoping you don't need to. So, we're going to cover your life in three stages or phases. There is BC, which is before cancer, AD, after disclosure, and then the in-between years, the Tour de France years. So let's just start at the very beginning. How would you answer the question, who is Lance Armstrong?
At this point in time?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question. It's a good question for really, I guess you could ask anybody that question, then they would pause. I mean, first and foremost, and I told you guys earlier, but as the whole group is here, you'll probably see some action behind me because tomorrow is Halloween and my daughter is dressing up in anime for school today. So I cannot promise that it's not going to get freaky here for a minute before she leaves. But no, she's not coming in yet. But it's first and foremost, father of five, right? I have three older kids, three of which are in college, and then I have two younger kids. To me, that's the most important thing that I'll do. I'm still at heart an athlete. I love to train. As soon as we're done with this, I'm going out into my garage gym and training for an hour. And then I'm a person also that I have to say, I'm just super thankful and grateful that I've been given the opportunity. It was many years where I thought, shit, I'll never get the ball back, right? I'll never be able to play offense. I'm going to be either in neutral or reverse for the rest of my life, which is a terrible way to think and a terrible way to feel. And so to be in, and I'm not, my life will never be as fast and as furious as it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But that's okay. Honestly, I didn't like that. I didn't appreciate that. And so, I like this speed and this pace that I'm at right now. And it's fun. I'm having a hell of a time. I can't lie. There's somebody trying to call me. What's going on here? Can you guys still see me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good.
Okay. So, you were born in Plano, Texas in 1971. Your mother, Linda, was 17 when she had you. You didn't know your biological father, and you took on your stepfather's name. Times weren't easy. They were pretty rough. What about your childhood do you believe pushed you to excel as a triathlete and then as a professional cyclist?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. And for the audience who doesn't know, so, obviously the world knows me as Lance Armstrong. I was actually born Lance Gunderson. So my biological father's name was Gunderson. The only consolation with having a name like that was my middle name is Edward. So I guess my initials would have been Leg, which, makes some sense, right? But, my mom was not she wasn't one of these parents where it's like, you have to go out there and play sports. You have to win. You have to train harder. She was very passive. She was very supportive. She was like, oh, that's, you want to join the swim team? That's cool. Wait, you're going to do a triathlon? Oh my God. Okay. I'll drive you there and I'll cheer for you. Like that was it. I didn't have I sit, and now as a parent, of course, I've had 5 kids go through sports and sports leagues, and you see these parents and they sit at these games and they yell at the refs and they yell at their kids and they yell at the coaches. I'm like, the fuck is your problem? They're 10 years old. You're settle down. Like my mom was, and that's the way I approach my kids' sports too. It's just like, look, y'all go have fun, right? It'll be okay. But so it was, if anything, I drove myself. I had great coaches in all the sports. My swim coach, he was a hard ass. And then I had other mentors in triathlon and tough coaches in cycling. And so that was really the hammer for me. My mom was more just, she was literally driver, cook, cheerleader, supporter, friend. And so the coaches were the ones who, really, sort of dropped the hammer, so to speak.
But by all accounts of sort of reading about your childhood, you had this tremendous fire in your belly. You were willing to train harder than anyone else. You wanted more than anyone else. Where did that fire in the belly come from?
No idea. I think, other than, even going back, I'd go on long bike rides, 13, 14 years old, so even going back that far, there was some connection between the physical and the mental, or the physical and the spiritual. I really loved it. I loved going out, even if it wasn't structured, right? If I would just go out for a 3 or 4 hour bike ride, and it wasn't a workout, it was just a ride. You're out in the country. And of course, in North Texas, going back that far, for anybody that's been to the Dallas area, you will know that everywhere north of Dallas, so Plano, Frisco, it's all Dallas now. But going back 35 years, it was all fields. It was amazing. So I would just go out and ride in these fields and just kind of get in the zone. And it was a therapy almost. And it's still, that hasn't changed. Like I still love those days. They may not be as long as they were before, but even if I go for a couple hours, it's therapeutic for me.
So, you started competing in triathlons. You started winning triathlons. You started beating people who were much older than you. And then you sort of got into cycling as your sort of sole sport. But by the time you were about 20 years old and you were recognized around the circuit in the US, that's about when I believe you started dabbling a little bit in performance enhancing drugs. Do you remember the first time you took it?
So, yes, dabbling is the right word, right? It was, what is dabbling, right? Is dabbling meaning dipping your toe in, or is dabbling a definition between dipping your toe in the shallow end or the deep end, so to speak? And I've never sort of thought of it in terms of the depth of the pool, but we dabbled in the shallow end for a little bit. But the that wasn't really in effect not a problem. The problem became when we dipped our toes in the deep end.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's, going back to 1995, probably.
Yeah.
That was the deep end of the pool. Right. And as the sport, started all sort of swimming in the deep end, so to speak, beginning in 90.
Sorry to interrupt. But before we sort of get to the Ferrari era, so to speak. And if we sort of just go back to when it started, and when you had the desire or the pressure to sort of do something like that. I just want to sort of take you back there to sort of understand really, what was the reason or what was the psyche behind resort, because you were doing very well without taking performance enhancements. In fact, I think it was an Italian race in '91 where you first really dabbled, and you were winning that race without performance enhancers. So just going back there to understand the genesis of why you went to that stage.
Yeah, I don't think it was as 91. I think you're talking about it was called the Settimana Bergamasca, which means in Italian means the week in Bergamo, the week in the region of Bergamo. That was not. I mean, there was a moment when the doctor for Team Motorola, which was the team that I was going to, came. And of course, he walks in with his doctor's bag, and we're all exhausted, and we're all like, "Yeah, just give us everything in the bag." I mean, that's as the story goes. That's not exactly what happened, and that was more or less a completely natural thing, as was '92 and most of '93. '93 was really the year when it wasn't, as we say, high octane, but we started to dabble in more low octane things that were pretty common in the sport, and then. That's also the point in time. I mean, I won the professional world championships at the age of 21 in 1993 without EPO, but not on bread and water, so to speak. So there were other cortisone and other little things, low octane enhancers that certainly were part of the game then. But that's also that was really the tipping point for the sport. At post '93, it was full gas for the sport.
So you talked about the World Championships, and you were then sort of around 25 post the World Championships when suddenly you experienced pain. Well, your balls hurt, and you ignored the pain for a long time.
One ball hurt.
One ball hurt. You ignored the pain for some time. You had to pull out of the '96 Tour de France.
Sorry, I have a special guest, Olivia. Look at all these folks in India. Come here. They want to see your outfit. Can I? She wants to ask me a question. Hang on. But you have to show your outfit before you ask a question. Okay, then you can't ask a question. You have to get over here.
Go ahead.
Yes, come here. Come here. Come here. Get over here. Oh my God, she's embarrassed. She won't show her anime outfit. I'm so mad. I'm so sorry about that.
Well, it's funny. Anime is a Japanese thing, and it's amazing how even in India, my kids are anime crazy.
She might come back. I doubt it.
So, you had to pull out of the '96 Tour de France. You had a poor Olympics. You were sort of tipped to win, but you couldn't compete. And then you went in to see the doctors, and it was a Wednesday, 2nd October '96. You were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The very next day, you had surgery. You were released on Friday. On Monday, you announced to the world that you had cancer. You started chemo that day, and then suddenly on Thursday, going through removing a ball, going through starting chemo on Thursday, you suddenly found out that you had tumors in your lungs and lesions in your brain. And, here was a guy who was at the cusp of great things. How did you make sense of all of that? And how did you deal with it? I mean, cope with it?
Well, first, let me just remind people. So this is 1996, right? And so if I think about everything you just said, and as I try to relive that situation, I relive all of that in 2020, which, by the way, has just been a terrible fucking year. We need to get through 2020 and maybe we'll all be okay. But so if that happened today, we would have so many resources and we'd obviously have so many questions, but we'd have some answers to those questions. This is 1996, right? Nobody was Zooming. Nobody, I had a flip phone. Google didn't exist as we know it today. I might've had a primitive AOL account. So I had no information at my fingertips. So there's obviously the fear and the concern that whether or not I live or die, but then there's the questions, right? So who's the best doctor? What's the best treatment? What are, where are the support groups? I mean, we were literally picking up pamphlets in the doctor's office. We literally drove to the bookstore and bought every book that had the word cancer in it. So that was our data, and that was our support or information at the time. It's crazy to think, it's been 24 years, but so much has changed. So I was obviously trying to gather as much information as I could. I was scared to death. I wasn't so much concerned with what the doctors said my chances were, whether it's 50-50 or 10-90. I didn't think a lot about that. I was more concerned with, I was in Austin, Texas, which is a very progressive city, was a progressive city in 1996, had no major medical facilities. So, oncology or cancer in Austin in 1996 was like going to the 7-Eleven. I mean, it was not, I knew I had to leave, basically. So I went to Houston, which really is a major cancer center at MD Anderson. Wasn't a fit for me. I immediately flew from Houston to Indianapolis, of all places. I'd never been to Indianapolis, and met with Dr. Larry Einhorn, his whole team, the nurses, the doctor, everybody. And I said, okay, this is my place. I'm not leaving. So I stayed in Indianapolis. And that's where, to me, I think that's where the key was, right? So whatever the chances were, and I would give anybody this advice that's either been diagnosed or has somebody they love that's been diagnosed, is you find that place that's gives you the most confidence, that you believe gives you the best chance to survive. And at that point, essentially, this sounds crazy, but I essentially turned my life over to them. And if it worked, then I'd get life back and go on and live. Or if it didn't, at least I would die in peace, knowing, hey, I tried everything, right? I didn't stay at home in Austin and maybe live, maybe die, and nobody wants to be on their deathbed with questions about the process that they put themselves through, and was it the right one? Was it the wrong one? I was fully confident that this was my best chance. I wasn't confident it was going to work, but I was confident that if I'm going to live, this is my best shot. And if I die, I'm going to die in peace.
Did you believe in God at that stage?
No.
So,
and I guess there's only one other thing, has nothing to do with God, but the other thing that I did consider when I was deciding where to be treated. So you have Austin. In Austin, I would have been treated with traditional treatment, right? So in testicular cancer, 90% of the young men are treated exactly the same, right? They get a regimen of chemotherapy called BEP. So BEP are the initials for all the different compounds, and the B is for bleomycin. So bleomycin is a very effective drug, but has significant side effects, right? The lung scarring that it causes would have prohibited me from ever getting on a bike. I actually did one cycle of BEP in Austin because I started chemotherapy immediately. When I got to Indianapolis, not India, but Indianapolis, close. Dr. Einhorn and his team, they said, look, do you ever want to race again? And I said, I mean, yeah, I guess I'd love to. And they said, well, then you cannot do bleomycin. So they changed my therapy from BEP to another protocol called VIP, which takes out the bleomycin. They don't give that to young men because it requires them to be inpatients. So BEP I could have done from home. I go into the infusion lab, get my therapy, and I come home. VIP is as effective, but it's way more toxic short term. So the consequence of that is I had to stay in the hospital. And when I wasn't being treated, say treatment took 4 hours, I had to do 20 hours. So the rest of the full day, I had to be on IV fluids constantly. Just to sort of flush out what was put in. And so I said, yeah, why not? I'd love to race again. But my point is that without them just saying, do you want to race again? And all the while going, wait, we got to save the dude's life too. So they switch me. I mean, without them making or asking that question, making that decision, we're not having this conversation. I don't go back to the sport. I don't make the good and the bad decisions that I made. And none of this happens. Right. And so I'm very thankful that that they had the foresight to consider, a future for me.
I mean, in some sense, because there's been so much time between your coming out of cancer and today, I think you're discussing it slightly more lightly than the situation that actually existed then. What makes me admire how you went through that period is the strength that you had in actually believing in yourself and coming out of it. You didn't believe in God. You had your mother who partway through had to go back to her job because she had to make ends meet. There was a question mark about whether, because you were in between teams, you just left Motorola and you were joining Cofidis, there was a question of who would pay your medical bills. But what gave you that strength to pull through all those challenges, all those knocks? I mean, even Cofidis, which was your new team, was having second thoughts about you and wanting to sort of terminate your contract. What gave you that strength?
Not wanting to terminate. They did terminate the contract, but that was a problem like that. That was a one-day problem. I was like, all right, that's lame, but okay, let's get back to business here. But in the business is trying to save my life. I didn't, and I had a lot of conversation with myself about religion, spirituality, God. Is this the point? I wasn't religious before. Gosh, is this the time? Is this the call, right? For me, is this the call to find that higher power, higher being, and ask those questions and sort of shift my thinking. And I didn't want to, and it's not, religion's a funny thing, and there's always, conflict and questions around religion and different religions and lack of religion. And as I had the conversation with myself, I thought this is a natural thing to do, to find God, and God is going to save me. I looked around and I'm seeing doctors and nurses and science and technology and drugs and ideas. And I'm like, wait, and literally at the end of the day, I was like, all this that's going on around me, this is what's going to save me. Now, spirituality is a little different. I really, and to me, this core group of people that I had around me, whether it's my mother, my closest friends, they were, I leaned into them, and I really, not that that's a religion, but it was my, they were my blanket, right? When you're a kid and you're crying and you're scared, what do you grab your blanket, right? You grab your cozy blanket. And I leaned into all of that. And when I had the conversation with myself, I didn't, I just said, look, I'm comfortable here, and I'm not going to look for anything else.
So, you had this miraculous recovery from cancer, and there were question marks on whether some of the human growth hormones that you were taking led to the testicular cancer. But once you got back to training for cycling, you went back to using performance-enhancing drugs. Was it easier or more difficult to go back to the drugs when you had this second chance at life?
Good question. I love how raw this is. This is, by the way, for the Indian version of Oprah, aka Chopra, there's no question that's off limits. So that goes for India's Oprah, Mr. Chopra. But and so at the end of the session, there's also no question that's off limits. So the drug, the doping, let's call it, right, was much more significant before. So I knew post diagnosis, treatment, recovery, that I knew two things. I knew that if you did go back with EPO as rife as it was and as beneficial as it was and is, there'd be no way to go back without that compound. So all of the other, but there was a bunch of other bullshit that we were taking before that we just eliminated. I mean, that's the sort of the irony in this story, is that as the story was told and unfolded, the perception was these guys had, secret things and a lot of things and crazy things. That's just not true. But that's okay, right? I mean, the world took the story and ran with it, right? The media took the story and ran with it, as they do, and that's fine. But it's not a true story, right? And so there are layers of truth to it. But anyways, to your point, I knew that EPO would have to be a part of the equation, and yeah, that was a scary, maybe not a scary, but that was a significant question for me. It's not a popular answer, right? EPO is incredibly effective, was totally undetectable, and most would tell you that relatively safe if taken moderately and under the care of a doctor. And I know that would cause a lot of people to shrug and go, wait a minute, this thing is that effective and it truly is rocket fuel. How can it be safe? That's what we thought. And look, I haven't taken EPO in gosh, 15 years. And in terms of a case study, and I'm not justifying any of our actions, I'm just simply talking to the efficacy and the safety of it. As a case study, you have thousands of young men who did that, thousands, right? That all, say they all stopped 15 years ago. There's no evidence of any long-term side effects, which, if you think about it, is pretty remarkable. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it's noteworthy. And so, yeah, it was a relatively hard decision that I had to make, and I did. And once you start, like a lot of things, you just kind of never stop.
So, just for the benefit of the audience, EPO is basically a drug that helps generate additional red blood cells, which boosts your energy. What the sort of cyclists of that era, including yourself, were doing was EPO, plus you were doing blood transfusions, plus you were having corticosteroids, plus you were having, what are the various things that you were having?
Just and the transfusions didn't come in until later, because they eventually they eventually figured out how to test for EPO. So, I mean, look, I'm here in Aspen at 8,000 feet. My body, and I don't know what elevation everybody in the room is at, but at 8,000 feet, my body is naturally producing more red cells than anybody else. And so that's exactly what EPO did. It replicated training and living at altitude, but we were racing at sea level, which is what you want. As the test got more refined and they started to implement the test, then it's funny. I mean, the transfusions was old technology, right? This is, if you think back, if you can remember the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles, I
was 4 years old, Lance. I was 4 years old.
I'm a lot older than you, but this was a big controversy in 1984 because they caught them using transfusions, and transfusions went away because EPO came along. As they tested for EPO, it was totally backwards. They went back to old technology. So then we started again doing the transfusions, still doing some EPO and training. But it was really just three things. It was that there was a little bit of cortisone and a little bit of testosterone, but no growth hormone, no other growth factors. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, over the years, there were just crazy stories you would hear. And cycling's funny, there's no secrets, right? Everybody, I heard this, synthetic hemoglobin. I mean, all these like cutting edge, weird compounds. I was like, fuck that. I'm not doing that. I'm happy doing just what we're doing. And so, but that part of me, as a cancer survivor, I if something was experimental or you would hear that it may or may not be going on, I just didn't want to have that conversation. That was too scary for me.
So, again, we're sort of the audience here is an Indian audience. And for a lot of people, cycling is Lance Armstrong. And they know that Lance Armstrong really goes fast, and he competed in this race called the Tour de France. But for everyone's sake, what is the Tour de France in Lance Armstrong's words?
It is what I truly believe, and what I tell people. I think it's the hardest sporting event in the world. Simply because it's 3 weeks. I mean, you just can't, the human body was not made to ride what's now, when we raced, it was 4,000 kilometers over 3 weeks. So through the flats, through the rolling hills, through the mountains, through the weather, through all the conditions, the wind, coupled with 200 maniacs going down the road who don't care about each other, right? All they care about is themselves. So you layer in the physical difficulty of it, you layer in the risk and the danger of having 200 lunatics out for themselves. It's a gnarly event. I mean, there's a bunch of hard sporting events in the world, but I don't think anything comes close to the Tour.
And cycling as a sport as well is sort of slightly a strange sport. It's a team sport where everyone has their roles. They're the domestiques. They're the guys who protect you, the guys who do the grunt work, and then there's the leader. And the other guys actually sacrifice their ambitions and dreams to make the leader win. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how a team works and how you led the team and how you ensured loyalty and discipline?
Well, that's right. I mean, and I'll put it in perspective. So if the Tour in those days, it's now gotten shorter a little bit, but in those days was 4,000 kilometers. The amount of time that I rode by myself, right, in 4,000 kilometers was probably somewhere right around 100 kilometers. So that's either in the individual time trials or later in the stages in the mountains when you would attack and break away and you would be alone. But for 3,900 kilometers, I was surrounded by 8 other guys. So that's everywhere from I'm thirsty and I need a water bottle, or it's starting to rain, I need my rain jacket, or I'm going to stop and go to the bathroom. Can you pull me back up to the peloton? I mean, they are a key part of any success in cycling. And of course, the irony too is that you get to Paris, you win the Tour de France, they give you the yellow jersey, and you stand on the podium all alone. So it looks like an individual sport, but it never has been. Even if it was 100 years ago an individual sport, there was constantly bonds and allegiances and collaborations formed on the road. But this is a very, I tell people, like, what is the Tour de France? I said, listen, it's like, the Olympic marathon meets car racing, meets a political campaign, meets some backstreet brawl. I mean, there is a lot going on dynamically within those 3 weeks.
So now, just sort of coming to what was your first win at the Tour de France, which was 1999, and the sort of mm-hmm. period before that. So the couple of years before that, you and I want to sort of concentrate a little bit on Dr. Michael Ferrari. So you were introduced to him for the first time in 96, around the time just before you were diagnosed with cancer, and you'd started working with him. Mm-hmm. And then post-cancer, and we talked about how initially you were just dabbling with doping, but post-cancer and sort of after Dr. Ferrari was in your team, it went from being a garage operation to becoming an industrial operation. It was meticulously planned and organized. For everyone's benefit, so that we can just visualize what happened and how, in some sense, spectacular the whole operation was. How is the whole thing done?
Well, all of that is right. I think that, and again, as the story evolved and was told to the world, and just people ran with the story, the perception of Ferrari, the perception of the program, it was portrayed to be very, very sinister. It wasn't. The way I acted as a gentleman, as an athlete, that was sinister. The plan, and whether it's training or doping, it wasn't sinister. and the truth in all of this really is Dr. Ferrari really brought structure, right? And so and yes, structure in and around doping, but more importantly, structure in and around training and diet and recovery and all. I mean, he was fanatical, and he also knew how to effectively help his athletes dope. But that was the most structure that I had ever had around training. And he was the most serious. To me, he instilled almost fear. Like, it sounds funny. It sounds bad, but he was so serious. I mean, he was one of these guys, like, and the first thing you always had, and this sounds so dumb, but this is the truth. You always had to get on the scale. Anytime you went to visit him, get on the scale. And if you were 2 pounds too heavy, he's like, look at you. You're not serious. Look how fat you are. I'm like, oh man. So, nobody wanted to show up and get on the scale and be 2 pounds overweight. But the weight, I mean, I stopped short of saying we starved ourselves, but we basically starved ourselves. And at the same time, you're having to train 5 to 7 hours a day to get down to that optimal, right? What was the objective? The objective was to have as much power as possible and be as light as possible. And he was, look, to him, power to weight, power to weight, power to weight. That's all he cared about. Now, the weight part is up to the athlete. The power part is also up to the athlete, right? How hard they train, how dedicated they are. And then, of course, then you layer in the compounds, which of course increase the power. So, I have, it's not a popular answer, but I have very fond memories of Dr. Ferrari. These athletes, myself included, were going to do what they were going to do. So and not that I ever had this conversation with him, but I think his view was like, look, me helping these guys make somewhat smarter decisions, he's not going to convince them not to do it, right? I wasn't the only athlete he had, and he wasn't the only doctor. There were 100 of those doctors. He was the best one, and naturally, that's the reason I wanted to work with him. But these athletes, they were going to go out and do whatever. And so it's better that, I guess in my mind, that 100 of these guys said, okay, whoa. I mean, I know you're going to do this. And it could be dangerous, but let's at least bring some adult supervision here.
So, and again, before getting into your victory in '99, in '98, you got a big warning in some sense. The topmost team, Festina, was caught doping. They were kicked out of the Tour de France. There was all this talk about a cleanup in cycling. But you still sort of stuck to the Ferrari program, and you took the risk despite the additional spotlight.
Of course.
Some people would say that's crazy. Take it easy, see how it goes. What made you so aggressive or reckless?
Well, I don't think it was a global news story. I think the media and the governing body thought, okay, this is so bad. Surely this sport will pay attention now, and will change. That isn't what the peloton thought. The peloton, there was not one person in that peloton that thought, oh my God, that was such a big story, and those guys got put in jail. They literally got put in jail. I mean, you see them one day, they're riding in the Tour, they go back to their hotel, and they are leaving their hotel in handcuffs. That's a big story. I mean, imagine if that happened at the forgive me. I know nothing about cricket other
Yeah,
than it's a little insect that walks around sometimes that people step on. But as y'all's biggest sport, imagine, I don't know what the biggest cricket match of the year is, but all the heroes of the sport are playing one day, and then that evening you see them on the news and they're being carried out in handcuffs. That's a big story. The athletes, it didn't matter, right? It was, and again, you have these 200 guys, all they care about is themselves. So they're looking over there going, okay, I have a feeling all 199 of these guys are still going to do this. So they say to themselves, which is what I said to myself, well, then I'm going to do it too. And there was no test. Right. And so the sport didn't change, gosh, for another almost 10 years after that.
So coming in 99, you won the Tour de France for the first time. It was a fairy tale, a miracle. Did Lance Armstrong win the Tour de France, or was it Dr. Mikel Ferreira?
It was a true partnership. Could I have won the tour with Dr. Chopra? No, the answer is no. But that is because it's not because of the doping. It was, he brought such a structure. And the other person who was really critical here to my success, to our success, was Johan Brunel, the Belgian. We call them a sports director, or a director sportif in French. It's basically a coach. He's the head coach of the team. He also brought an incredible structure to this team, not just picking the athletes, but the tactics. There's we could talk all day about the complexity and the tactics of the sport of cycling, and that was the partnership, myself, Ferrari, and Brunel. I couldn't have won the tour without Ferrari, and I couldn't have won the tour without Brunel. And so, but I knew, but that was my job, right? As the racehorse, I hired the doctor and I hired the coach. And so, if you make different hires, it doesn't turn out the same, but, I think that's pretty common in all sports. Right. And so.
And you took the world by storm in 99. I mean, immediately after your tour victory, Nike flew you to New York on a private jet. You went and met President Clinton in the Oval Office. You were on every talk show. But, in your heart, you knew that you had bent the rules. Did that leave you with a hollow feeling inside, or a fear, or did you believe you were invincible back then?
Well, no, it didn't leave me with I didn't feel, I didn't, standing there in the Rose Garden with Bill Clinton, giving him a Trek bicycle, I didn't feel like a fraud. And I don't, and again, I'm not, I made my own decisions, and I've paid for those decisions and will pay for those forever. But I don't, but I still also, I think it's important to talk about the landscape or the environment or the peloton at the time. I don't think any of us felt like frauds. I mean, I think we all looked at each other and were like, all right, by the way, all 200 of those guys, none of them had just graduated from Stanford Business School. I mean, we were all poor, hungry, tough kids. And that while we didn't come from the streets, we certainly didn't come from Rodeo Drive. Nobody. And so they were all just looked at each other and was like, all right, this isn't ideal. Like, nobody wanted, as a young man, and me included, said, I cannot wait to go to Europe and do all those bad things and take all those drugs. Like, nobody wanted to do that. It just, what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to lose, and we didn't want to go home.
Yeah. And you repeatedly said this in your defense. I mean, you once you admitted to it, you said repeatedly that, look, I had to do it. I wanted to win. Everyone was doing it. And that's a defense that, some of us in business also use. We say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is how things are done in India. This is what you've got to do. But at the end of the day, you did have a choice, didn't you? And, Greg LeMond, a sort of 3-time champion who was an American before you, did leave cycling. Scott Mercier, who was part of the USPS team, made that choice and left cycling. But you didn't. Why didn't you?
Well, no, but I mean, well, let me back up. So Greg is a separate, probably a separate situation. I mean, Greg retired. I mean, Greg.
We'll need another episode for Greg.
Yeah. He Greg is an interesting guy. Look, Greg was a great cyclist. Whether or not he did or did not take something, we will never know. Everybody sort of has an opinion on that. Mercier is a great example, though, and by the way, lives right down the street here in Aspen, Colorado. Mercier, and I'm not trying to justify my actions or be critical of anybody, but here's Scott, right? As I said, those 200 guys that made the decision to stay, we came from the streets, basically. We're tough kids but Scott Mercier comes from a wealthy family. He had graduated from business school from Cal Berkeley. Like when Scott Mercier and hats off to him when he says, I'm not doing this, I'm going home. Well, I mean, he works down the street at Merrill Lynch, literally. I wasn't going to go work for Merrill Lynch, and the other 199 other guys, none of them are working for Merrill Lynch. So Mercier's looking at his hand, right? His hand, of the hand he's been dealt. He's like, all right, well, I don't really want to do that. And so I'm going to go. He had options, and again, hats off to him, right? For setting himself up for a different kind of success. But none of us had those options, right? And I guess the cynic or the critic would say, well, yeah, you did, because you could have quit and gone back home and gone back to business school. You might be 5 or 6 years behind, but you could still do it, which is true. But we didn't. And so we didn't think that way.
Yeah. My next question is sort of, firstly, thank you for being so kind to answer all these horrible questions of mine. But my next question is also sort of slightly.
They're actually not horrible.
Okay.
They're not horrible because it happened. It's the real world, and this is the truth, and this is these questions 10 years ago, pre-disclosure, would have been horrible. But we all know now. Everybody in this room knows. Everybody in the world knows. I know. You know. Scott Mercier knows. I keep pointing over there because his office is roughly like a quarter mile away over there, which is so funny. But it's not horrible because it's my life. And answer, you asking the questions and me answering the questions honestly is so much better than 10 years ago when I was the most famous athlete in the world and was making $20 million a year and everybody loved me and I was fucking lying to you.
Yeah.
Right. That is horrible. That is horrible. I promise you. And so this isn't horrible.
And sort of my next question.
It's real life.
My next question is really sort of a parenting takeaway that I want to take. And it's not the question you think I'd ask. When we're with our children and we're sort of being strict with them or not strict with them, lenient with them, what struck me about your story also was when you were 13 and 14 and doing triathlons, you were actually competing illegally because you had to be 15 and you were forging your birth certificate in order to participate. Do you think acceptance of cheating at that age contributed to your being slightly nonchalant about doping?
Sorry, somebody just walked in. My dog is going crazy.
No,
hang on one second.
No.
Hannah, can you?
Deep, I'm going to eat into 10 minutes.
Can we grab the dog?
Because we're running a little.
We have this new puppy, and anytime some stranger walks in, he goes crazy. But so just to give the folks, because that's true, that's inside baseball right there. That's not many people understand that. So we were from a liability standpoint, you had to be 15 or 16 to do the triathlons. And I was at 14, 15 years. I was competitive with 30-year-old men. And I was like, I want to race them. But I'm not old enough to get through the liability of the triathlon. Triathlon's not a deadly sport, but it's a dangerous sport. So they had all the insurance wise, they had all these liability things in place. And so, yeah, we would take, we, we would like take my birth certificate, and we would put a number over it and photocopy it and present the photocopy to the organizer and said, no, he's 15. Look. And what everybody thought was a 15-year-old was a 13-year-old. And he showed up and he didn't drown in the swim and he won. So, but to your point, yeah, it probably, I mean, that was, no part of me at the time was like, well, that's against the rules. I shouldn't do that. Or my mother certainly didn't question it. She was like, he's going to go out here and kick their ass and he's not going to drown. So I don't care. But it was, I guess it was cavalier at an early age and a bit of a renegade or an outlaw, so to speak. And yeah, it is the same frame of mind. It's the same DNA. It's the same set of decisions. Like, I know that's what the rule is, but that doesn't get me to where I need to go. And so, yeah, it was, I don't know that it was, it's what ultimately made me make the decisions I did, but it was certainly a layer to it.
So I get how, you took the risk, you didn't have much to lose. When you won your first Tour de France, there wasn't any reputational consequences that you were worried about. But the crazy thing is that, you won it once, you weren't satisfied. You went to win it 7 more times. And through the period of those 7 wins, it wasn't as if it was smooth sailing. 99 itself, there were traces found of corticosteroids in your urine. I remember in 2001, the UCI, which in some sense you had in your pocket, even sat you down and just warned you to take it easy. But you never did. You were full throttle. You did what you needed to do to win. And you didn't care in some sense. What pushed you to do this again and again, to want to win again and again?
Well, it was my job to win. And, I did, the decisions I made, or we all made, or whatever, at the end of the day, I was being paid. It is a seriously competitive and professional sport. The contracts, while they're smaller than other global sports, they're still big. My view was, this is a job, right? This is my job. And my job is to not just race bikes. My job is to win. And I don't know about you guys and gals, but, or who your bosses are, your employers, or what your incentive is. But if that's your job, well, you got to do your job, right? As they say in French, fais la métier, like go do your job. And so that's, I was, in a sense, I was proud. I was like, these people are paying me a bunch of money to go do a job, and I'm doing my job, right? As opposed to paying me a bunch of money and I don't do my job. As now somebody that pays other people and has a whole roster of people around, if somebody doesn't do their job, well, they don't keep the job. And so I truly viewed it as work.
You won 7. You sort of toppled Indurain's 5 consecutive Tour de France record, and then you retired. And the Lance Armstrong story cannot be told without talking of your foundation. Mm-hmm. I think if people didn't know about the foundation's work, they definitely knew about the Livestrong yellow bands. It was the coolest thing to wear. It was fashionable. You raised $500 million for the foundation. Obviously there was a side of you which was very passionate about the foundation because you had gone through it and you wanted to help people. But it was also an awesome insurance policy, wasn't it?
Well, obviously not, because it didn't it didn't cover the mistakes. But I didn't. I mean, the answer is yes, it was, right. I mean, there was always, I'm sure, the question, whether it's in the press room or in the courtroom, people saying, is this worth it, right? We can take the guy down, right? But you're not just going to take him down, you're going to take the whole thing down, right? And all the good that it does, and all the money that it raises, and all the millions of people that it supports, you're going to take that down. And they did. And so, but it was a halo for a long, long time, until it wasn't. And not just the foundation. If you consider the industry, right? This industry of cycling, that sector of sports, it was the growth that was experienced in cycling at the time from an industry standpoint was tremendous. So then you had the question, well, you're going to take that down. And so I didn't, a true skeptic would say he started the foundation and did all of these good things to hide what he was doing in his sport. That's not true, right? Because I was diagnosed in 96 and I started the foundation in 97, even as small as it was started with the purest of intentions. Because the success on the bike got so large and great and grand, the foundation naturally grew. And so it was great. I mean, you can't take away the $500 million. You can't take away the support that we gave to 3 million people. I'm super proud of that, right? And I think my, sort of my charity piggy bank is pretty full for the rest of my life.
Yeah, as you should be. And in fact, one of the greatest tragedies is that you're no longer associated with it. But I just want to take you now to 2009, and this is when things went crazier. I mean, all right, there's this crazy kid from Plano, Texas. He's won the, no one in America heard about cycling, professional cycling. He won the Tour de France 7 times. He's achieved more than anything else. He's got rock star status. He's dated Sheryl Crow. He's done it all. And you had fucking got away with it in 2009, right?
Yeah.
But no, you had to go back. You did a comeback. And again, this is 2009. So, we're talking about the sort of your contemporaries of the time, Jan Ulrich and Ivan Basso, and your teammates, Tyler Hamilton and the whistleblower Floyd Landis, being caught before you made your comeback for doping. And you exposed yourself again. Why? Why did you do this crazy thing?
That's a great question. I actually still ask that question of myself. Yeah, just bored. Yeah, just bored. I was bored. The foundation naturally, as you're winning 7, it's going like this up and to the right. It did start to plateau. It's still doing great. It didn't go down. It just plateaued. So I was like, all right, let's put some fuel on this. I still thought I could be competitive. 2008, Carlos Sastre won the Tour de France. Carlos Sastre is like he can't.
I think
he can't get out of it.
I think you used the word pussy.
Well, maybe, but I wouldn't say that word today. But I mean, he can punch himself out of a paper bag, right? And so I'm seeing this. I'm like, I can do this again. Look, and all of that has a huge layer of ego. Ego and boredom is a really dangerous combination. And the reality is I came back and I didn't win, which it's easy. It's funny because my first instinct was like, that was the biggest mistake of my life. I would have got away with all this if I don't come back, right? That the comeback bridged my current life now and at that time to my past. And so with that bridge, they were able to walk across the bridge and go pull the stuff from the past. I don't know. I mean, it was a mistake in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, I woke up 2 hours ago as Lance Armstrong, and I don't want to wake up as anybody else but Lance Armstrong. So all of the stuff that happened, the good, the bad, hero to zero, all of the lessons learned, all of this deep, deep realization about myself, about my friends, the people around me, the relationships that were lost, the relationships that were gained, the bond with my children. It's been a gnarly ride, but I wouldn't change anything. I've just, it's now it could be different. You know, I look at, you mentioned Tyler Hamilton and Floyd Landis. I mean, these guys are, I don't know what they're doing right now, but I don't think they're doing a lot. I think the decisions they made were not good for their lives. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it was such a shit show that I've had to navigate this. I've had to ask really deep and hard questions of myself. And I've managed to, somewhat land on my feet. And I don't know. I'm very happy. I feel like I'm productive in playing offense in life and in and outside of business. And I just don't think I could have got here without all of these. Look, we're all sitting here today because literally a million decisions or decision points happen in our lives. And, I wouldn't change it.
Did you ever think of, I mean, you were pushed into a corner, and that's the reason why you sort of came clean on the Oprah show, and you wanted to control the narrative. But did you ever think of just continuing to deny it and to just fight the litigation? Because, last year, we at EO New Delhi actually had Rajat Gupta, who was the former head of McKinsey, who was caught up in an insider trading imbroglio when he was on the board of Goldman Sachs. And, despite being convicted, despite serving a full sentence in jail, he continues to deny. And therefore, there remain believers and non-believers. I mean, he's blamed the American justice system. He's blamed Preet Bharara, who is then the New York Attorney General. He's blamed everyone. Did you ever think of just denying it? I mean, there are still people. I mean, as I said to you before this started, in Deep in Me, you have fanboys. There are still people who would have sort of believed you if you had denied it.
Of course.
Yep. Did you ever think of that?
No, I didn't. No, I knew the gig was up, as they say. I knew that I was going to get sued multiple times. And I mean, in my own head, I thought I'm going to go through probably 10 lawsuits. So what happens when you get sued? What's the first thing that happens outside of them telling you we're going to sue you? Second thing that happens is we're going to depose you. So sit down. Let's say we're going to ask you, you're going to swear under oath that you're going to tell the truth. And if you don't tell the truth, then you're going to jail, right? That's perjury. And it's easy. In my situation, it would have been easy to prove perjury. So I'm looking I'm facing 10 lawsuits, all with depositions, all with tough questions, all under oath. I said, that's it. The gig is up. I don't want to go to jail. I mean, this is going to suck going from hero to zero, but I damn sure I'm not going to jail. And so I was like, and it was no, I mean, really the true crack came when my most loyal teammate, also an American, George Hincapie, who did all 7 tours with me, was a great friend. When George Hincapie signed a sworn affidavit that said he doped and I doped and we all doped, it was over, right? And it would have, I never even considered that, actually. Never.
So, your party line in some sense is that you feel sorry for what you did, but you would have still done what you did, knowing the consequences. Have you ever thought of saying, I wish I didn't do it? And wouldn't that story be a better story? I mean, you'd be in textbooks.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't born to be in textbooks. That doesn't get me to that. This is where people miss. Are they mistakes? Yes. The way I treated people, tremendous mistakes. That I would love to go back and massage and change. But all of the mistakes, and again, there's these little minuscule points in our lives where we decide to go left or right or straight or whatever. It doesn't it doesn't get me to where I am today. And I know that's not a popular answer. Look, people want you to, the purist or the whoever, or maybe almost everybody wants you to say, oh, you just start crying. Please cry right now and say you made all these mistakes and you're so sorry. Yeah. Look, you guys are going to get what you're going to get, and what you're going to get is the real thing. And so yes, I think the important thing is to acknowledge that there was a lot of mistakes made. We can't go back and change that. And I'm not going to, even in front of my children, I would say the same thing, right? This is an important conversation, but it's not as important as the conversation that I still to this day have with my children. I'm gonna call it as it is.
We at EO, believe in a lot of learning through sharing. And one of the things that I think will be sort of very useful from our perspective is in terms of, how you dealt with your kids and how you sat them down before the Oprah show and told them what happened. I want to put that question slightly more broadly, in the sense that, if daddy has done something wrong, or if the family is going to come into disrepute, how should you deal with your kids, and what should you tell them?
Well, what I did was I was obviously very honest with them. And also, just to set the scene, there was 2 sets of kids. So I had my 3 older kids, which at the time were, call it, Luke was, and when I did Oprah, Luke was 13 years old, and the girls were 11. I have twin girls that were 11. But then I also had a 1 and a 2-year-old who obviously weren't asking any questions. So I knew that this conversation I had with my older kids was a conversation that I would have again 10 years later with my kids as they grow into this story, and as they watch YouTube, and as they're going to go back and watch the Oprah interview, right? So then they will naturally have questions. So I really operated off one rule, is we're going to have, and this is the rule, we're going to have this conversation right now, and we can have this conversation 1,000 more times. It's not one and done. So I'm not going to have this conversation until you don't ever ask me again. Because if you have a question tomorrow or 5 years from now, the door is always open. And so whether or not you hear things or learn things or come into things, you can always come back to me and say, okay, I just have another question. So it's full transparency with them. And, I look at my kids. I got 5 of them. Normally if you got 5, there's always one who's like a crazy person. And I'm just so blessed that all 5, they're smart, they're empathetic, they're passionate, they love each other. And, I'm batting 1,000 when it comes to how my kids have done. And so not to say, I probably have nothing to do with it, because they have great moms that probably had a lot more to do with it than I did. But back to your point, I mean, it's an open book forever, literally forever.
What's been the most difficult or painful part of this sort of fall?
I think the separation or the estrangement, let's call it, from the foundation, I think it's the greatest shame. I don't think it was a good idea for them. I think there needed to be a period of separation, or call it timeout. But I look at where I am today, right? And so now I'm sitting here talking to you on all my podcast gear. We now have the biggest podcast in the world, with a massive, 20 million downloads. It's crazy, right?
And you still have your 7 Tour de France yellow jerseys on your wall, don't you?
I do. I actually haven't had them hung up, but if you look back you see, wait, how am I doing this? Right there. That's one of the cups. So I've got 7. That's the trophy they give you when you win. Nobody ever came and took them. Nobody ever claimed them. So I kept them. They're not I don't know where the other 6 are. I think the other 6 are in Austin,
and you could probably auction them for millions.
Well, I would never do that.
What defines, I started this interview with asking you who Lance Armstrong is. What defines Lance Armstrong? Is it beating cancer, winning the 7 Tour de France titles, being caught, or admitting to what you did?
No, the real one is, it's all of that. I mean, you can't, and I tell kids all the time. I speak a lot to college kids. At the end of the day, you don't get to write your bio, right? I mean, you get to write it in the sense that you get to act and operate and walk through life, but somebody else is going to write your bio, right? Your Wikipedia page. My Wikipedia, I didn't write my Wikipedia page, and I would never read it. But if I did read it, I would hate it. But that's because somebody else wrote it. Right. I go do a documentary with ESPN, the 30 for 30, the 4-hour special. People loved this documentary, and I hated it because you somebody else did it, and it's your life, and somebody else is telling your life story. The reality is that's the way the world works. Somebody else is going to tell your story. Now, you can help sort of massage that story and craft the story, but at the end of the day, the only thing you really get to write, I guess, is your tombstone. But
what do you want your tombstone to read?
It always comes back to fatherhood. Like, if I get that right, I don't really give a shit about anything else. And I'm proud of the way that that's happened thus far. I mean, look, my younger ones are 10 and 11, but I'm pretty happy with how that's going, and I'm happy with and not to sound corny, but I'm proud of myself for hanging in there and somehow managing to reemerge. Not it will never be what it was before, right? This as you called it, rock star status. But you know what? I don't care. I didn't particularly love that, and I work for myself now. And I work on my terms, nobody else's terms, which, if you think about it, is a pretty powerful thing. And when I see a person, whether I go to a restaurant or I go to the airport or I look at you different than I would have looked at you 10 years ago. I'm like, who's this Indian dude asking these crazy questions? It's just and the world has just hammered me so hard that it's forced me to just understand. And so, again, this goes back to this debate, right? Would you change anything? No, because I love looking at you in the present. And by the way, all these questions you asked me today, if you'd asked me these 10 years ago, I would have lied, but I would have forgotten it. So now I get to be honest with you, and guess what? I'm going to remember it. And so, I don't know. That's to me, I love that part of it.
Do you believe you're the greatest cyclist of all time?
Well, no, I don't. I'd be crazy to think that. Eddie Merckx is the greatest cyclist of all time. Not only did he win, yes, I won more tours, but he won everything. He won the classics. He won the world championships. He won the Tour of Italy. He won, in terms of, if you just looked at his resume, it's far more impressive. Now the sport, nobody from now until the rest of time will ever be as successful as Eddie Merckx. The sport is way too competitive now, way too deep, way too broad. But Eddie's the greatest of all time. Now, if you asked me, do I think that I was the greatest Tour de France rider of all time? I mean, it's not my job to say, but I would, if you made me say, I would say, yeah, I think I am.
Before I hand over to Deep for a shortened Q&A round, thank you, Lance. And I want to conclude by saying that Lance Armstrong's audaciousness hasn't perhaps ever been seen in sporting history. His desire to dominate and win at all costs is irreplicable. Despite being discarded and disgraced, he is still a legend, he is still relevant, and he is still wanted, as all of us sitting here today have shown.
But can I just say one thing about that?
Yes.
And because I appreciate you saying that. And that means a lot. But not everybody shares that view, right? And in my answer to those who don't share that view, you just said legend. Like, legend is a huge, I mean, how many legends are there, right? There's not many. Muhammad Ali is a legend, right? Michael Jordan is a legend. Michael Phelps is a legend. Serena Williams is a legend. But not everybody shares that view of me or others. That's okay, right? If people in this room said, "Are you fucking kidding me? You just called him he's not a legend. He's an asshole. He's a cheater. By the way, it's okay. I understand that, right? I have no problem with that. I'm not fit for everybody. And so, but it is okay. And it will always be okay.
So the question I want to leave everyone with before I sign off and Deep takes over is Lance Armstrong a good man who did bad things, or a bad man who did good things, or a man who was willing to do whatever it took to win? But there's no denying that whatever he is extraordinary. Thank you, Lance, for your honesty, and thank you for this time. Deep, over to you.
Thank you, Lance, for being so candid. And I still have goosebumps. And thank you, Naval. You did a great job as always. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to ask Sunanda Kashyap to ask her first question, and then we'll take a couple more and try and wrap up in about 10 minutes.
I'll talk fast. Should we read the question? I'm sorry. Am I supposed to be reading?
She's going to ask you the question.
Okay.
Hi, Lance. I can't believe I'm talking to Lance Armstrong, so I am really nervous right now. But I do definitely think you are more than a legend. So my question to you is, so many life experiences, pretty much fearless, or you've been conquering all your fears, you're completely honest. But as humans, what remains? What are you scared of today?
Well, I'm so glad you said the word fearless, because I came to this realization like 2 or 3 years ago, really, maybe 4 years ago, that as I looked at myself and the path that I was starting to go down, I said, you know what you are, dude? I said, you're fearless. And fearless can be misinterpreted as reckless. And could even be reckless, right? So, but there is a very fine line between fearless and reckless. I don't ever want to be reckless. I always want to be fearless, right? So fearless has gotten me to where I am today. There's only one thing that scares me, and that's your question. And I think us as parents can appreciate this. If anything happened to any of my kids, whether they got cancer, or whether they walked across the street and they got hit by a car, or they crashed their bike, I mean, I would literally be in a home. I don't know that I could recover from that. And so that's the only thing that scares me.
Thank you.
All right, the next question from Arush Sugani.
Hi, Lance. This is Disha, actually. I'm Arush's spouse. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background before I ask my question. I've been a sports journalist in one of the TV channels here for over a decade. And in fact, when this entire episode just blew up, I was reporting on this. Today, I'm asking you a question from a very different perspective, not as a person who comes on screen, but the thoughts that actually also came to my mind off screen. One is that good people make mistakes, but nothing can actually really take away the impact that you can make on a sport. Tiger Woods, for example, at that point of time, sort of the incidents were pretty much back to back. And he also at that point of time was viewed as a fallen hero. So the question that I want to ask you is, one is, in your own head, when do you think you would have redeemed yourself? Or do you think that process has already happened? That's one. Number two, your life has been this epic journey, from hero to zero, like you said yourself. However, living it on an everyday basis has got to be tough. But what do you, for example, tell yourself in front of a mirror every day, or just speak to yourself to actually keep that strength going? Because it's got to be an everyday sort of strength. It's not something that you just do, at a webinar. So these are the two questions.
So the first one, in terms of redemption, I think it's a two-part answer. I think in the sport of cycling, and this is my belief, I will never be redeemed, right? Nobody's going to give me. I mean, I may have these trophies, and I may in my own head believe that I'm the winner because nobody claimed the trophies. And anyways, but in terms of the sport, I will never be redeemed. Nobody's going to give me the titles back officially. I'm not going to be asked to come to the Tour de France and ride around with the director. I'll never be redeemed, and that's okay, right? And so, but I never work off the notion or the belief that at some point I'll have redemption in my sport, because I won't, right? It just, the story and the fall was too great. And it's, what happens in 100 years when I'm long gone, and, maybe my grandkids will, they were, they asked us to come to the tour. Is that redemption? I don't know. But in my life, I won't be redeemed. And I understand that. And I'm at peace with that. And sorry, I started rambling. So what was the second question was, what do I say to myself when I look in the mirror? Well, it depends if you want the serious Lance or the not so serious Lance. Anna can tell you that I play this joke with her every time we're in the bathroom or getting ready to go out. I look in the mirror and I say, "Oh, fuck, it happened again." She's like, "What? What?" I said, "I just got better looking." And she's like, "You're such an asshole." That's the joke, right? That's the, but that's a true story. I don't really sit and have conversations with myself in the mirror on a serious level, but I mean, I guess just sort of on a deeper level, I like looking. And I mean, aside from having a lot more gray hair and some wrinkles and, being 15% body fat and not 4% body fat, I don't like looking at that. But again, I said it earlier. I mean, it's not so much a mirror conversation. It's just a check-in. Like every day I get up out of bed, I put my feet on the ground. I'm like, all right, who just put their feet on the ground? And it's me. And all the good and the bad and the indifferent, I'm proud of me. And I'm proud to take the next step, which gets me out of the bedroom, down to the coffee maker, and I get on with my day. Like I wouldn't, I say it all the time, it's not popular, but I wouldn't change a thing.
Thanks, Lance. I'm going to ask Krupa to ask her next question.
Thanks, Deep. So from my perspective, 2020 looks like a year that's forced all of us entrepreneurs to face the question of life versus livelihood, whether it's for our business or for our employees. And to me, it feels like, based on the description of what you've been through, getting back into competitive racing after cancer and all of the other decisions that followed seem to have followed this path. So I'm wondering if you would care to share some words of sage wisdom on how to navigate the set of questions that faces us now.
Well, it is a good question, and it really has led. Look, I mean, 2020 has been between wildfires and global pandemics, and gosh, who knows what happens next week? I mean, here we have, in a matter of days, we have probably what I would consider to be the most important presidential election of all time. Of all time, who knows? I've been blessed in a way to sort of. I wasn't prepared for cancer, but I lived through all that, and it taught me a lot. That prepared me for the second tectonic shift in my life, which was Hero to Zero, right? Hero to Zero sucked, but it wasn't the hardest thing that I'd ever been through. So now I have these two experiences, and now we're living with this just surreal set of circumstances and situations with this pandemic that in a lot of ways, look, it has a real impact on people's lives, and people die and we lose loved ones. And that's, nobody ever wants that, but I've used it as I think a lot of people have, as a total reset. So even people that are not that healthy or don't think about their health, they do now, right? So that was a reset on their perspective on their health and wellness. That is a good thing. Being stuck at home, being quarantined, you're sitting around, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't. And so what do you do? What did we do? We had family time, right? That I look at that and I'm like, that is a silver lining to all of this, right? This reset with family, reset with health, reset with wellness. All the while, I must admit, as I think we all do, it's getting old, right? I'm ready. I'm done with the reset, perhaps, as I think a lot of us are. But, I try to look at, and maybe it's just because of these two previous experiences I've had, I try to find the silver lining in this. And, example, right? The world shuts down. We're stuck at home. I'm like, oh my God, I got all this free time. Well, what have I always wanted to do? I've always wanted to learn how to fly. Okay, so I'll start taking my classes online. I've got all this time. I'll just take flying lessons all the time. I'll do all my book work. And then when the world opens up, then I'll go out and actually learn to fly, which I did. So for me, it's like finding these things amidst all the madness and the adjustment and this uncomfortable place we were put in, and playing offense. I mean, I always love to talk about, like in sports, you either play offense or you play defense. And in life, we're going to play offense or defense. I'd much rather play offense, even amidst disruption and stuff that we didn't see coming. Play offense.
Do we have time for one quick question? One last question?
The one thing that I just learned from that answer is that you are working on another book.
I don't know. I mean, I'm working on another book in the sense that I'm living my life, and perhaps those chain of events or these things happening could be a book, but I'm not actively working on a book. Although I get that question a lot, but no, I don't know that the world wants another book from me. And what is a book? A book is content, right? I mean, we're creating content right now, right? I'm reading you guys a book, literally, or sort of, not literally, but sort of in some way, but I'm not actively putting pen to paper, so to speak.
So here's the last question from Ritesh Bowring.
Lance, hi. I'm a huge fanboy, always have been. This has been incredible. I just still wanted to ask you, you talked about going from 4% body fat to 14, 15%. So what is your food like now, and what is your training program?
It's, I guess the only good answer I can give you is as soon as we hang up, I'm going to go do a workout with my trainer. But I've been crazy busy the last month. I've probably slept in my bed in the last, even amidst this global pandemic, in the last 30 days, I've probably slept in my bed 5 nights. And so I've been traveling a ton. I'm raising this, we're almost done, but we're completing the raise for this, our new venture fund. So I've had to travel and raise the fund. It's completely kicked my ass. I don't like it. I mean, to what we talked about earlier, I mean, it really is it's so ingrained in me and so important for my own mental well-being and sanity that it's kind of driven me crazy, maybe crazier than I normally am. But yeah, it's not been good. And so we're almost done, and but I'll get back on it and get back into the to the program. But I guess, look, I'm 50 years old, so I'm never going to be competitive. I'm never going to go want to train 5 hours a day. I'm good with 2 hours a day, and I'm good. I may not be loving 14%, but I'm fine with 10%. It's never going to be what it was before, and that's fine. And in terms of diet, it's a good question. I don't have a good answer. I pretty much eat whatever I want, and so I love the idea of playing with certain things and seeing how they affect not just your physical strength, but also the mental side, clarity, focus. I do think there is, in effect, hacks that we can play with. So I love the notion of that. I'd be lying if I said I'm a practitioner of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lance. I want to thank you for being so candid, for being so vulnerable and open. We all learned so much about the real Lance Armstrong. Yep. And so thank you very much once again for being a part of today's event.
Yep. And as we said, before everybody got on, I told you guys, I've never been to India. So, and I know that we are doing this through this format for now, but I'd love for when the world gets back to normal. Well, I just love the world to get back to normal, first of all. And when it does, I mean, I've never been to India. We got to get over that. And then I can even go really understand what cricket is outside of a little bug that crawls on the floor.
Well, yeah, I have a great proposal here, given that we have our friends from EO Lahore also here. When the world becomes better, we should do a peace ride in Kashmir.
I love it.
Done. Okay.
I love it.
Putting that in the calendar for next year.
Okay.
Thank you again. Thank you.
You guys, everybody have a good day. Or a good night. By the way, I don't even know what time it is over there.
It's actually not so bad. It's 8:35 in the evening, so not so bad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're ending your day. I'm starting my day. So y'all have a good one.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Okay. See you guys.
Thank you, Lance. Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We had a great time and we hope you did too. Take care. This brings us to the end of today's session. Cheers. Bye-bye.